All right, so I'll go ahead and get started. Thank you, Evelyn, for giving me the opportunity to talk. I always enjoy presenting. So we're going to walk through for everyone on the call. I don't have a video because I'm the CISO and I don't allow video at State Employees Credit Union because of the security risks. So you won't get a chance to see me in my COVID outfit, which is a t-shirt and blue jeans with holes in them and a baseball cap. But you'll get to hear me for the next 30, 40 minutes, and then we'll have a question and answer period afterwards. So I'm going to talk about advanced persistent threats. You may have heard many talks about APTs or APAs, depending on who you've heard from. But I'm coming at this presentation from the financial industry perspective. So we're a highly regulated industry. I have worked in mostly financial industry related companies for the last 28 years, but I have worked in retail and manufacturing, and the regulations are very different in financial than they are manufacturing. There are some similarities. Obviously, PCI crosses the border regardless of just about any industry. If you take credit cards or process credit cards, you obviously have to comply with the PCI regulations. But advanced persistent threats don't really care. They transition across any industry in which they can succeed in their attack. So we're going to talk through some advanced persistent threats. We're going to talk through, if it lets me, we're going to talk through how to define one. What is it? How do you kind of see it, notice it in your environment? What can you do about it? And then we'll talk through kind of the 5 stages of attack. We can argue if there's 3 stages or 10 stages. It's fine either way. I just chose 5 stages because it was easier to talk about in a 1-hour time frame. So first, we're going to define it. APT is an advanced persistent threat. So one definition is an attack that is typically sophisticated in nature, and its design is to go after your company's assets, whether it's data or money, or some people will call it the crown jewels for the company. It could be Coke super sensitive Coke formula or Pepsi formula, or some other highly sensitive data that your company processes. Equifax is a perfect example. They have everybody's credit data. They have a lot of sensitive PII around people. So why not attack one of the 3 major credit agencies if you want to get PII on half the world? And advanced persistent attack is just what's going. What is the ongoing? It's the attack side of it. You can have a threat, but the threat's unrealized until the attack is launched. And the emphasis on an advanced persistent attack is the continuous nature. And it can be clandestine. Sometimes it can be pretty straightforward. But for the financial industry, we are experiencing and have been for the last, I'm going to say 5 years, some very persistent and very clandestine and sometimes extremely sophisticated attacks against the environments. Obviously, financial industry, they want to go after the money. And unfortunately, our customers or our members, if you're a credit union, they're not necessarily proactive in maintaining good security hygiene, right? You may have heard that word before, security hygiene, you may not. But it's just a good common practice, not one. A perfect example is if you have a 401k with a financial industry, Don't use that same password or passphrase or user ID for your 401k that you do for your regular checking account or for your Facebook account or for some other social media account. But unfortunately, a lot of personnel tend to use very similar passwords and user IDs across multiple systems. And so when you have a compromise of a company like Equifax, all that data gets harvested and immediately gets used in what we call credential stuffing attacks or dictionary style attacks against every company that that threat actor has ever had access with or knows about. And so for the last few years in the financial industry, I have seen where as soon as a compromise was announced, whether it's SolarWinds or Colonial Pipeline, and we'll talk about those here in a few minutes, the data stolen during those attacks are almost sometimes within hours, it seems like, that data is then used to launch an attack against a financial institution. I have seen it at multiple financial institutions where those attacks were launched, those credential stuffing attacks were launched. And so it's just a continuous cycle, and that's why I'm driving home that whole continuous phrase. So what is an APT? We just kind of defined it, but how do you identify one? Well, we've had some news stories here lately. SolarWinds about 6-7 months ago, Colonial Pipeline just a few months ago. So what do we know about those attacks? And we'll learn more as the days fall out and more data becomes available. But high level, what we understand about the Colonial Pipeline was an unauthorized access via a compromised VPN account. Happened on April 29th, was discovered 9 days later on May 7th by a control room employee, not an information security person, who saw the note, contacted management, and then information security got involved. And I apologize if the bottom part is cut off. But basically it's just saying information security never knew about the issue until they were contacted by management. So what does that tell us about the information security program? And I don't know the people at Colonial Pipeline, and I'm not throwing rocks at them, but we have to think as information security professionals. We have to start analyzing the data, and part of that analysis is to look at, okay, what were the mistakes that were made? It doesn't mean that the people were bad. It doesn't mean that they were incompetent. It doesn't mean that they were lazy. It just means they're humans and they made a mistake. So if anybody on the phone works for Colonial Pipeline or did, I'm not trying to offend you. But the breakdown of the information security program can be looked at in several ways. And as a CISO, that's kind of my job, is to look at where are the gaps, where are the issues, identify those gaps and issues, and try to fix any issues that I know about. And sometimes it's just pure experience that tells you what you have to fix. So Colonial Pipeline, right, they had unauthorized access through a VPN account. So were they not monitoring their VPN accounts? Do they have a SIM? And maybe it takes 10 days to get through the data to find an issue. And so that's why they didn't see it. Maybe they were going to find it tomorrow. We don't really know all that. We're making assumptions based on the data we have at this point in time. But their information security program is going to have some issues. Not finding an issue in 9 days, maybe that's bad for you. Maybe that's good for you. But step back and think about it. 9 days is a very long time to have someone to have unauthorized access in your environment How much more damage can they cause in those 9 days? And how much more work does that cause for you as the CISO or the information security program to have to clean that up? So monitoring access and who has it, implementing these good security hygiene items such as multi-factor authentication. We don't know yet if they had MFA and maybe it got compromised. But if they didn't, that's kind of an obvious thing, right? We always hear about the easy solutions and the way to fix items, but then we don't necessarily perform those good security hygiene steps. And so we have to start kind of holding ourselves accountable. And this is just Matthew's opinion. This is not a state employee's credit union opinion. This is Matthew's opinion. But the only way we're going to start beating some of the bad people back is if we start holding ourselves a little bit more accountable, whether it's in reporting or whether it's in management of our security programs. So I'm going to pause there for a second because I feel like I've been talking straight for 5-10 minutes. Any questions out there? Okay, I'm going to take silence as no questions. So I'm going to talk a little bit about SolarWinds. So SolarWinds, if you don't know, is a typical IT management company, vendor. A lot of companies use it. My company uses it. They had unauthorized access in early 2020, and then they moved within their network. And this will, I'm bringing this up because the points I'm talking through are going to become relevant when we start talking through the 5 stages of attack. So they moved within the network laterally, got advanced level access or administrative rights. Then they loaded additional malware into the environment that enabled them to add malware to their Orion software. So if you don't know, Orion software is kind of the main software for SolarWinds to help manage servers within an environment. Okay, and once they compromised the Orion software that everyone uses, that's where they became a supply chain threat. So now that Orion software gets pushed out because you have automatic updates, because you're following good security hygiene, right? And you're keeping on the most recent version of your software that doesn't have vulnerabilities, you hope. And so that software got pushed out to all the customer base of SolarWinds that was keeping up to date. Obviously, SolarWinds didn't know about it and got pushed down to all the customer base. So now every customer of SolarWinds has now had their latest version of SolarWinds software pushed to them with malware on it. Now, it hit the news because FireEye, it's Mandiant, they're an information security company, and so they had a compromise of some of their software that they use, and they caught on to it. I could argue that they should have found it a lot sooner because they're an information security company, but the bottom line is they did find it. They contacted SolarWinds, and then they did the right thing, which is they let people know, hey, this is a problem. It turned out to be quite a large problem across the globe because when people, paused a little moment to think, wait a minute, I use SolarWinds. Wait a minute, what version am I on? And so it had extreme ripple effects within any industry, whether it's financial, whether it's manufacturing, whether it's retail, it didn't matter. SolarWinds is a very popular software because it works very well. People are quite happy with it. But they weren't following some of their own good security hygiene standards. And then they didn't identify it obviously very quickly because they were in for a very long time. And then they weren't again, following good security practices within their own environment to validate and test that before they roll out a new update to their software, is it free of malware? Is it reliable? And so they're going to take a huge hit, and they already have taken a huge hit. And interestingly enough, I actually know who the new CISO of SolarWinds is, the gentleman that I've worked with before. So you're going to see a lot of changes happening at SolarWinds. That's a good thing. Obviously, a company that has a major compromise and it makes the news, it's certainly bad for that company. It can have a reputational hit. We all know that. It can have a hit if they're a publicly traded company directly to the stock value and stock price. It can have a hit on their customer base. But the one thing I have learned in 28 years is that customers and members have a tendency to forget, especially with the volume of events that occur. People tend to get drowned out by all of the compromises. And so when it hits the news, they say, oh, here's another company. I don't even remember the last company because it happens every week or every month or feels like every day. You know, it depends on who you talk to. But everybody's different about their interpretation of an attack. Yet we, as customers of these vendors and companies, we don't stop long enough to think, what am I doing that's enabling this? When's the last time I changed my Yahoo Mail password or my Gmail password? When's the last time I changed the password on my bank account or my Facebook account? Oh, well, who cares if they get access to my Facebook account? Or who cares if they get access to my Peloton camera on my Peloton bike that I use in my house? But step back as a security professional and think through that. The Samsung screen on my refrigerator, oh, they're going to see that my milk's out of date. Yeah, that's not really what the person's after. They're after access to that device because you've made it easy for them on your home Wi-Fi network because you enabled it without a password or a password that is 15 years old. And they've now gained access to your Samsung refrigerator or your Peloton bike that you've Wi-Fi enabled. And now they have access to every item on your home network. So now the 15 devices you have on your home Wi-Fi network are now a giant bot army, a 15 bot army that they can launch an attack against State Employees Credit Union or Wells Fargo, and multiply that by the 2 million customers who own Samsung brand new refrigerators, or the 15 million Peloton people who've been stuck in their house for COVID and can't exercise. So now they bought a Peloton and they all want to talk to each other and communicate with each other across their video-enabled Peloton bike. Those 10 million, 20 million, 15 million armies become a very sizable army that can launch an attack against a very large organization. And so my particular organization, credit union, we're not a small credit union, but we are isolated to North Carolina. And so, we have always kind of, it's a running joke with me that we've always thought, well, we're just a small credit union. Well, there are no small credit unions when you have 50 billion in assets. There's no such thing as small. Once you get above 10 billion, I don't care what industry you're in my personal opinion, you're now a very large target. And those large targets get attacked. And so when you have a 15 million man army of Peloton bikes launching a denial of service against our website, we have significant impact. That means our members can't log in. That means our members can't pay their credit card balance or pay their mortgage. That's not something I'm comfortable with as a CISO, obviously. That's not something my entire management team is okay with. And so those real world threats come home very quickly, and they can have very sizable attacks. And so when we talk about advanced persistent threats and attacks, we have to realize where they're stemming from. So what are we going to do about it, right? So we know we have these attacks. We know we have the vulnerabilities. Fix the vulnerabilities. If you look at your vulnerability management program, and if you're sitting on vulnerabilities that are a year old, then are you really fixing them, or are you just ignoring them? If you fix them, then they can't be used against you. They can't be used against me. They can't be used against the next company down the line. So when you're fixing those vulnerabilities in your own environment, you're actually helping the rest of the environment, whether it's all financial industry, whether it's all manufacturing. Now we can argue back and forth about, well, my CEO needs to give me more budget. Okay, that may be true. Maybe you got to work on your presentation skills to be able to sell your CEO on the risk of that vulnerability, so that he understands exactly what he's accepting when he says, nah, I don't want to spend the money to fix that vulnerability. I don't know that we collectively, information security people, do a great job of that. I harp on myself repeatedly because when I don't win what I'm just going to call, for lack of a better term, a sales pitch, I blame myself, because it's my job to be able to convey the information in a real world way that is understandable to my CEO and my CIO, so they can make an informed decision. And if I'm not doing that, there's nobody else to blame but myself. If I do a good job and they still say no, okay, well, guess what? The very next thing that should be in your hand is a risk acceptance form that says, okay, Mr. CEO and Mr. CIO, I've informed you, you understand the risk. I need you to sign this, because when the Department of Justice comes to visit, or the FBI comes to visit us, I'm going to say, I made a presentation specifically on this vulnerability. Management chose to accept it. It is a CYA for the CISO, but it's really important for your management team to understand exactly what level of risk they're accepting. And we don't always do a good job of that. So step one, fix your vulnerabilities. Step two, verify that you fixed them. It sounds super simple, because it is. You have to test your fixes. You have to validate that you did the reboot of the server, or that you made the registry edit change on every server, not just the primary. You did it to the backup. You failed over to the backup to verify that it's in place. And then, obviously, step three, develop your information security program to detect it and try to be as proactive as you can be. We can't always be proactive. We have to rely on reactionary tools at some point in our environment, but it's still important to always be thinking, how can I be as proactive as possible? And putting those steps and those security measures in place enables you to be as proactive as you can be, so that when you have to be reactive, the damage or the potential risk is less. And then step four, in my opinion, use outside resources. Not every information security program likes to hear that. Not every CISO likes to think, why am I going to let an outside vendor, air my dirty laundry? Why am I going to let them see what I'm doing wrong, or tell me that I'm doing something wrong? They're just going to try to sell me a tool. They might, but they might be selling you a tool that you actually need. So it's foolish, in my opinion, to rely on your information internal security program without using external entities that have skill sets that your team may not have. If your team is a champion and just rock stars in every aspect of information security, that's great. I still think I have never worked for a company or met a CISO or an information security team that does everything perfectly. And I've met with FireEye, and they were one of the top leaders, and still are, in my opinion. They're pretty good, and they still had a compromise. So, arrogance is not a good measure of a CISO. It usually leads to a stumbling block down the road. So, top 10 vulnerabilities, and this is fake data. So for anybody that's concerned that I'm just now presenting information from my environment, I'm telling you, this is not real data. This is just a screenshot of sample data out of a tool. So it's not real, but it paints the picture, right? So you see the list of high vulnerabilities, critical vulnerabilities, and then the count off to the side. So maybe you have 10,000 devices and 9,824 of them have this vulnerability. Well, that's a pretty significant vulnerability if you, like for this particular example, if you use Jabber in your environment. Maybe you don't use Jabber. Maybe you have Jabber by default in your SCCM build, which you don't know, SCCM is just a software packaging. Maybe you don't have that in your gold image build of laptops and desktops. Okay, well, take it out of your gold image, because if you're not using it, you don't need that piece of software halfway installed or partially installed with a vulnerability in it. And then guess what? You just dropped your vulnerability count by almost 10,000. That's always a win. If you can drop 10,000 in a couple of minutes, with no significant impact to your environment because you're not using it anyway, why not take advantage of that? Why leave that opening available to a threat actor? So it sounds simple because it is. I'm going to keep harping that, but fix your vulnerabilities. Yes, I'm a CISO. I've been doing this a long time. I know there are legacy systems out there that can't be fixed. There are systems that are running on antiquated hardware because the software won't run on anything new. You can't handle new OS versions. Okay, but you've known that for quite some time. You need to get off that legacy system. You need to migrate to something that can handle the latest hardware. For one, at the very least, then you'll be able to reboot it and get rid of threats on that particular system. You'll be able to patch what you know about. Isolating it from the network, yes, that's a fallback measure. Not allowing it internet activity, yes, I get it. I've done it at multiple companies. That is a stopgap measure. That should not be your end-all be-all fix for a legacy system. You need to get off the legacy system. It's hard to hear. I get it. I fight this battle every single day, but it's important to remember. So let's talk about the 5 stages of advanced persistent attacks. I'm going to pause here for a quick second and see if there are any questions. Okay, we got a quiet crowd, Evelyn. So the whole purpose.
Well, I did mute everyone, so they would have to unmute first, and then. Sorry about that. I just don't want any background noise for you.
That's fine. I appreciate it. So the whole purpose of an advanced persistent attack is to gain the ongoing access to the system so they can walk through these 5 stages. And again, if you like 3 stages or 7 stages, I'm happy to talk about that later. But the whole point for the unauthorized actor is to gain the access they want, establish that foothold, deepen their access, right? If they don't already have admin access, they want to get admin access. And then they want to move laterally within your network, and they want to look, learn, remain unseen, and then they want to start harvesting data. Whether they exfiltrate the data, they transfer it out or not, they may not need to, depending on the level of access they have. So you may never see them if they're not trying to steal. If your security posture is that, well, we haven't lost any data. For one, again, that ignorance is bliss kind of feeling. They may not have stolen data because they don't need to steal it, right? They've infected, if you're SolarWinds, they've infected your supply chain, and now they've infected every single one of your customers. They didn't need to steal the data. They came in and added their data to your data on purpose, because that's exactly what they wanted to do. They wanted to compromise every single customer you have. And a lot of companies aren't thinking through that. I know personally, I have talked for 10 years about the potential implications of supply chain attacks and what that means for us. SolarWinds was an eye-opening experience for a lot of executive management teams. I hate that it had to occur, but I'm happy that it finally occurred, so that it's causing people to stop, look, and listen. So 5 stages of attack. So stage 1 obviously is to gain access. Think of it like a person, you got a front door on your house. Well, you don't leave the front door open, because you don't want just any Yahoo walking in your front door in your house, because they, unfortunately, they might want to steal something. And so you put a front door on there, and you put a lock on it, and you need to think about what you're protecting and why and how, because the way you protect your systems, your company, and your data determines whether you admit it or not, or know it or not. It determines what's important to you. If the only thing you're protecting is your externally facing website, then maybe all you care about is the customer who's coming to you to buy something from your website. What about the person who already is a customer, right? And you've now allowed their data to be stolen, and they're now getting attacked, right? So that whole Peloton, Samsung refrigerator, now your company has become an entire bot army against all your customers. That's not a good way to retain customers. So obviously the initial step is to gain entry. Sometimes it's ransomware, simple email attack, a phishing attack, or whaling attack, depending on how familiar you are with phishing attacks. I'll just explain. Whaling attack is just another way to identify a phishing attack. So a whaling attack is against your CEO or your CIO or CFO or some high-level individual in the company that may fall for the phishing attack and allow the access, or worse, allow the infected file to be loaded in the environment. Okay? But obviously, the first step is gain access to the target. Once you get access, the very next thing you're going to want to do is establish your foothold. So you're going to create accounts typically. You're going to create backdoors and tunnels to move around within the network, hopefully undetected. You may or may not load some malware. Sometimes it's, coding. Sometimes it's just covering their tracks, right? So, excuse me, they may log into your SIM tool and remove all the logs, showing that they've accessed the account or the VPN concentrator. And I apologize if I'm talking too technical. Feel free to ask me questions. But the very next step is, if they don't already have it, is they want to get administrative access. Why do they want administrative access? Well, because 9 times out of 10, nobody pays attention to an admin logging into a system, because they're an admin. They're supposed to have that access. Well, are they supposed to have access to your core database of customers and all their user IDs and passwords? Are they supposed to have that access? Or are they just supposed to have access to the operating system that data resides on? They don't necessarily need to have access to the data. They might only need access to the OS to do patching. So why are they looking in that folder that has all your customers? Why are they looking in the folder that has all your, in financial industry, all your loan accounts, the social security numbers of every one of your members or customers? They don't need that data. So why are they accessing it? And if you're not monitoring your admins, then, you know, that's right back to bad security hygiene. You're not doing the basic steps. If you trust everybody in your company, you might want to seriously reconsider that. Statistics, I can throw statistics left and right because, you know, they're almost 50% of the time wrong. But one of the statistics I heard not too long ago, 45% of all compromises come from internal, whether it's a, oh crap, I didn't mean to do that, or it's I'm pissed off because I didn't get my pay raise this year. Attack. It's still an attack, and it's still a significant number of attacks. 45% is a very large number. If I can block 45% of attacks against my environment, I'm definitely going to spend the time and the money to do that. So the next stage, stage 4, is move around. So once I'm in, I've covered my tracks, I've gotten my administrative rights. Now I can move around in this environment, and that whole look, learn kind of mindset. Now I just move around within your environment at will, looking for the most sensitive data that I'm after, whether it's accounts to launch account takeovers in a financial industry, or it's, you know, the secret sauce for Coke's formula or Pepsi's formula if you're a Pepsi drinker, right? They're after whatever sensitive data you have. It could be PCI data, it could be PII data. You don't really know what the actor's after because realistically it doesn't matter to you. They're using it for something. It's your data. You should protect your data, and it's your members' data or customers' data. They expect you to protect it. And the number of privacy laws that are coming out left and right, it's going to become more important for every company to take seriously the data that their members and customers give to them. They're going to eventually, companies are going to start to be held accountable for not taking good security measures around a person's data. It hasn't happened yet, as far as I know, but I just see the writing on the wall where there's going to be class action lawsuits against companies for just not following basic good hygiene. Now, everybody can argue left and right about good security hygiene. What is it, and how far is too far, how far is not far enough? But the courts are going to come up with an answer, and I suspect we won't like it. So reconnaissance, right? So once you're moving around in there, then you're at the look, learn, and hang out and do whatever I want for as long as I can. From inside, they get full understanding of how everything works. They know all your vulnerabilities. They probably have compromised your email system, and so they're seeing the emails flowing from the CISO to the head of infrastructure talking about vulnerabilities. And so now they have all the list of vulnerabilities you have, and so they're finding new and different ways to launch attacks against you and other future targets down the road. Now you've just become a training ground for them to get better at their job, which is stealing data. And so that's where that whole possibly indefinitely, you know, if they've been in so long that they now compromise your backup systems, the chances of you getting them completely out drastically reduce. I'm not saying it's impossible, but I'm telling you it's going to be extremely painful And once they get into your backup data, for you to completely get them out. And it's going to be uncomfortable because you're not going to be 100% sure that you have gotten them out, or that you're not just letting them right back in. So what did we learn? Well, we learned how you may already know how to define an advanced persistent threat. We talked about how to recognize it. We talked about what to do about it. And then we talked through the 5 stages of attack. It's certainly, depending on your viewpoint, the presentation may be sobering, may be offensive, may be old news. I'm fine with any of those answers. I'm just presenting information based on my experience and background with my particular companies that I have worked with. I'm not saying what I have presented is accurate for every company out there or any of the companies that anybody on the call works for. I'm just trying to educate everybody I can about what we are experiencing at State Employees Credit Union. So that's the end of my presentation. I'm happy to take questions or answer any questions, if there are any. Well, Evelyn, I either overwhelmed everyone or offended everyone.
Let me stop the recording because sometimes